stuck going through the morning motion.
Okay, maybe we can start. Okay, hi and welcome everybody. My name's Kate Shaw. I am a scientist at the ICTP and a particle physicist. So this session today is co-organised by ICTP and Sesame. ICTP is known as the Abdus Salam International Centre of Theoretical Physics. It's based in Trieste in Italy, and it works for scientific excellence and supporting science and scientists in developing countries. And along with ICTP, we have Sesame, which stands for Synchrotron Light for Experimental Science and Applications in the Middle East. And this is led by the scientific director and the co-organiser, Andrea Lausi. So today we're going to be discussing physics and accelerators for science and social justice. We're going to start with some opening presentations from our panelists. Then we're going to have a short discussion, and then we'll open the floor for question and answers. So do please collect your questions for that session. So we're going to briefly introduce the speakers. We have Jihan Kamel, who is a beamline responsible scientist at Sesame. At the end, Bobby Acharya, he is a senior research scientist at the ICTP. We have Sekazi Mutengwa, who is the chair of the LAMP Executive Committee. And finally, we have Galileo Biolini, the Director Emeritus of the Centro International di Fisica. So welcome, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. So we'll start with our first presentation from Jihan. Yeah, it will be here.
We prefer that. Thank you. this on? Yeah. So, good morning. So, as Kate thankfully introduced me, I'm Jihan Kamal, the infrared beamline responsible of Sesame. And I hope that during the next minutes, Kate, you will be very kind to remind me after 5 minutes. I will be introducing to you Sesame synchrotron light source. And I will hope by the end of these minutes, you will realize why Sesame is a unique place in our region and maybe also in the whole world. So Sesame is a particle accelerator. It's a global research infrastructure, and it's as the other global research infrastructures, it has one unique value, that's science. And with science, we have common purpose and we have common values that nobody can argue with. So science also confirmed that we shared 99.9% of our genes with each other. That means we share the same disease burdens, the pollution, the energy, the global warming. And also that means it sheds its impacts on our economy, food security, and disaster management. And let's not forget what science and synchrotron light sources have provided the whole humanity with solutions when the COVID-19 hit. This is just one example of the production of synchrotron light sources. So in these global research infrastructures, we do basic and applied multidisciplinary science. We do almost all the applications, ranging from physics, biology, chemistry, life science, medicine, agriculture, water pollution, air pollution, cultural heritage archaeology, and so on. So the point is that not the expertise to do these applications or to provide the world with solutions, because the point sometimes it's the budget. So sometimes establishing such research infrastructures goes beyond the individual capacity or the budget of just one country. Here, we speak on the theme of the World Science Forum this year, that is the science and accelerators also for social justice. And what you see in this map, that with all these crossing, it just gives you a brief and quick idea of how this region is shaped by geography, culture, traditions, religions, nationalities, and also a lot of political conflicts. And I'll show you how, in a place that's 30 kilometers from the capital Amman, that's called Allan in Jordan, how with just a very simple formula that is 1 + 1 = 2, which is a very basic formula that nobody can argue with respect to that map, in commonly known as science diplomacy, how we manage to correct and how to balance all these conflicts with science. So there is a very long history of Sesame. It started in 1995, and then we are now in 2022. But there is a lot of ups and downs along this history. And we managed to go from just a basic idea that started by Abdus Salam, the Nobel laureate, when he thought in 1985 that it would be a very good idea to have a synchrotron light source in the Middle East. And he was right. That now in 2022, we have an operational synchrotron light science. It's the only and the first one in the Middle East. So we started by international support that continued along the way with us. What you see to the left is the ship leaving Hamburg in Germany with some dismantled pieces. And what you see to the right is Sesame now in 2022 with an extensive upgrade of the main storage ring, the main machine of the accelerator. Here, you know now also why Sesame is unique. Because all these members you see here, those are the current members of Sesame, and without any alphabetical order, they are Israel, Egypt, Cyprus, Palestine, Jordan, Turkey, Iran, and Pakistan. And it's very well clear why science diplomacy was needed and still is needed in this region. So Sesame is a particle accelerator, intergovernmental organization at the service of its members and the whole world, and it's located in Jordan. It stands for Synchrotron Light for Experimental Science and Applications in the Middle East. And Sesame also has observers. Those are the countries you see here on this map. You see that we are having a lot of international support in terms of expertise, of backing, donations. So it's open to the whole world to support Sesame as long as they believe in this facility. Okay. So the motivations behind Sesame, basically to introduce world-class research, basic and applied science, to be international center of excellence, to address all the regional and local concerns, to promote capacity building, scientific, economic, and also the human capacity building. In other ways, we can summarize it here that the Synchrotron Light facility is operating in a democratic and just mode to use scientific cooperation to promote peace and understanding between people from different traditions, races, political systems to come only together with science. So we have here science for peace. On the top of that, science as a human right to reduce the gender gap, to allow more women scientists in the region to pursue their advanced research career, to reverse the brain drain, which is confirmed that the low and middle income countries are the most severely affected by the inventor. Okay, so with extensive international support and cooperation from the Sesame observers and others as well, we managed to bring it to operation. In 2017, it was officially opened. In 2018, it became the first associate of LEAPS, the League of European Accelerator-Based Photon Sources. And in 2019, it became the first large accelerator complex to be fully powered by renewable energy within a very kind EU support. And something that we learned along the journey is that if you are being well-trained, that means you can also train others. So our users community are from the Middle East, from all over the world, and from beyond. And this pie chart that you see here is just a proof that came from our last call for proposals that was launched a few months ago, how Sesame is serving science internationally, not only to its members, but also to other countries, because we are providing top-level scientific research facility. Something that also is assuring us that we are moving in the right direction. The publications, not only the number with respect to our facility that's in this short time, starting its operation with the first beamline in 2018, also count the COVID time. So we reached now 61 peer-reviewed publications from just 3 operational beamlines. 2 are joining in the next year. So we will have 5 phase 1 beamlines so far. And with all the comments that we get on our publications rate and also the impact factor of the journals that we publish in, it is a remarkable success. So our next mile, as I said, if we are well trained, that means we can train others. We can bring others to this world of synchrotron light sources. And if you look at this map, you will see that the whole Africa is still without a single facility of this kind. It's the only continent that's remaining left behind without a light source of this kind. So Sesame also learned from all the other synchrotron facilities all over the world, and we want to pay the favor again, and we want to be a role model, and we are already a role model to other emerging facilities. So we are sharing all the expertise, technical, scientific, administrative as well, and also we are sharing lessons learned, how to overcome the difficult times. So we are providing an inspiring example to follow. Sesame was the first synchrotron light source to sign MOU with the African Light Source Foundation, and we are having now ongoing cooperation strongly with the African Light Source Foundation, and CKASI will continue on that. And I couldn't find a better quote than this one, since we are already in South Africa. We also climbed one great hill, that is Sesame, and when you climb a great hill, you only find yourself that there are many more that you need to climb. I think the next mile, the next hill, will be the African light source and also the Latin American light sources. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jihan. Thank you. It's such an inspirational centre, and we're going to hear more about the impact that Sesame has on the region. Such diversity of science and diversity of scientists. CKASI, you can sit or stand as you prefer.
Jihan has the right idea.
Yeah. Thank you, CKASI.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is CKASI Mtingwa, and I'm chair of the LAMP Project Executive Committee, and we'll say more about that during the discussion. But I'm also a member of the Executive Committee of the African Light Source. I was previously deputy chair of the Executive Committee, and then I stepped down because I thought it was important for the deputy chair to be from the African continent. And so the new deputy chair is my good friend sitting in the back there. Raise your hand, Prosper Ngabanziza, who is from Rwanda. And also sitting in the back, we have Sonia Semeta from the University of Cape Verde, who is, she is also the new president, am I correct, of the Union of Physicists from Portuguese-speaking countries. And so on our executive committee, she forms the link to Portuguese-speaking African countries, which is extremely important. Okay, let's see, next slide, please. Oh, I do this. Okay. Okay, what are the socioeconomic benefits of the synchrotron? That's what this light source is. And maybe I should just say a quick second. A light source, an advanced light source, is an electron accelerator. So electrons are just traveling around, and when they come into a dipole magnet to bend it, it throws off radiation. And that's the synchrotron radiation that people use to study samples of materials. And also, it doesn't travel in a complete circle, a perfect circle. It goes straight, and once it hits a dipole magnet, it kicks it, and that's when it throws off the radiation. So you have these long, straight sections alternating with the dipole magnets. But in addition, people have found that if you put these things called wigglers, which are alternating magnetic fields, the beam wiggles its way through there and gives off even brighter beams. So that's just for those of you who are not familiar. So what are the important aspects of this for Africa, or for any country actually? But no, it would boost the African research capacity and human capacity. I hope I have the right. Okay. It will tackle all of these diseases that are so endemic to Africa. I mean, COVID-19 is everywhere, but it's been devastating in Africa. You have malaria, TB, AIDS, Ebola. It would help to build collaborations across many disciplines, because these light sources people think of as being physicists type thing, but you know, they impact many fields: physics, material science, paleontology. If you want to study a sample of some human or animal remain and non-destructively, these are perfect devices for doing that. So they cross so many fields. You can imagine all of these different scientists at the same location, right? The same light source, studying, and just think of the cross-disciplinary research and collaborations that can come out of that. Let's see. You enhance local feeder instrumentation. To have a light source somewhere, if I'm a professor at, for instance, University of Johannesburg, and the light source is located in Egypt or wherever, then I need to have build up my local laboratory so that I can, I can synthesize the samples that I want to study and do pre-screening and so forth. So these light sources will build up, having this light source will build up local infrastructures. Industrial use of these light sources. I mean, the industry will definitely want to knock on the door. And in the U.S., for instance, I don't know the policies around the world, but light sources are partly funded by charging industry for the use. Professors don't have to pay, right? If you're a nonprofit type person, like a professor at a university, you don't pay. But industrial users have to pay a fee, and they're willing to do it because of the importance of these things. And they're champions for peace. I mean, Jihan just talked about Sesame, and you have nations who politically have problems dealing with each other, all coming together to work in peace for a common goal in science. Of course, returning the African science diaspora. Bringing other people in who are even not Africans to come in, because people will flood in to be a part of any kind of a synchrotron light source that you will have. And now we're at what's called the 4th generation synchrotron light sources. These are the brightest. And so this is where the African light source would like to be able to get in the game, because technology changes over so fast that you want to try to be, if you start a new facility from scratch, to be at the leading edge of that. Okay, so the little history timeline, there were, on the African continent, people started using light sources in the 90s, and there were publications. The first formal call was from this African Laser Center, which is something that I was involved in at the very beginning. And in fact, the Director General of Science and Innovation in South Africa, Philemon Jwaha, that you heard him speaking or hosting the panel the other night. So I knew him back before he rose to stardom. And so we worked very closely in establishing this African Laser Center, which built up local laser infrastructures across the continent. But one of our goals at that time, back in 2002, was to have an African light source eventually. Things didn't move so much until around 2015. We had our first annual conference that was hosted by the ESRF in Grenoble. So Francesco Sette, the Director General there, was very gracious. And after that time, we've had a number of conferences, and it's also important to note that the President of Ghana offered his support to champion this project among his colleagues. So the LAMP project that I mentioned to you, it stands for Light Sources for Africa, the Americas, Asia, Middle East, and Pacific. And so we send teams of researchers to faculty, student teams, to various light sources around the world for training. And we've had about 100 awardees so far. And we are now in the process of choosing our new group for 2023. So this is a professor from the Botswana University of International Science and Technology. His name is Philip Oladijo, and his student. And they are at the Siam light source in Thailand. And I think that this is one thing I want to mention. The light source generates lots of scientific outputs, but it's important to note all of the institutes and industries that grow up around it. So it forms a complete campus. Like this is the Diamond Light Source in the UK. And there are over 100 companies that are co-located there. And you have research institutions. So they generate a little academic city around them. So that's one of the great benefits. And if you look at a study from the Diamond Light Source, between 2007 and 2020, about $1.2 billion was invested in the facilities. So this is a $1 billion investment, but look at what came out of it, $1.8 billion. So that you get a lot more out than you put into it. And with that, I think I would thank you for your kind attention. Before I go, I would like to just mention that the LAMP project has produced a nice brochure in 5 languages to explain to the layperson what light sources are all about. So I have a few here, a few in French, Arabic, Portuguese, and Spanish. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Kazi. And I really liked what you said about these infrastructures being champions for peace. I think that's really nice, and we should touch more on that later. Okay, Bobby, would you like to come up and give your presentation, or you can? I'll do it from here. Okay.
Sorry, I should have.
There we are.
Oh, and the clicker. Hi, everyone. I'm Bobby from, I work at the International Center for Theoretical Physics that was mentioned at the beginning by Kate. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the ICTP, and in the context of today's discussion, you know, the ICTP as a facility, in a sense, for furthering the scientific and educational needs of the world. And in particular, I'll talk about the Physics Without Frontiers program that we started around 10 years ago. So the ICTP, which is the International Center for Theoretical Physics, was founded in 1964 by a Pakistani Nobel Prize winning physicist, Abdus Salam, that was also behind the idea for the Sesame project that we heard about in the first presentation. And what I wanted to emphasize is that Salam was from a remote region of Pakistan, and also from a religious minority. And from that point of view, every time he was going home in the summers, he felt disconnected from the scientific community. So the ICTP was sort of created as a kind of home away from home for scientists that are isolated in different ways. And today, the ICTP, through its mission, supports scientists from developing countries throughout their entire careers. And the Physics Without Frontiers program that I want to focus on today is a program for university students that are from areas and regions that where they may not have access to master's or PhD or research opportunities. Before we get to the Physics Without Frontiers program, I just want to mention that the ICTP focuses on different regions of the world, and in that context, we have helped to develop a number of regional institutes, partner institutes. Two of the main ones are we have one in South America, the South American Institute for Fundamental Research in Sao Paulo, but since we're here in South Africa, I wanted to mention the East African Institute for Fundamental Research, which is located in Kigali, and is directed by Omalulu, who you can see there on the picture. The main mission of the East African Institute is to serve young physicists from and around East Africa, but really it serves all of Africa. And it offers a master's degree, a 2-year master's degree in partnership with the University of Rwanda. And in the picture there, you can see the first crop of students. I'm happy to say, actually, one of the successes, even though the institute is relatively young, from the first crop of students earlier this week, Tony Kakona got his PhD. Tony is actually from Kinshasa, Congo. Omalula was supposed to be with us today, but apparently it's challenging for a director of a major institute that's Nigerian and works in Rwanda to get a visa to come to South Africa on a timely fashion. He was supposed to be one of the panelists. Physics, so I'm going to turn now to Physics Without Frontiers. So we work to inspire, train and motivate physics and mathematics students worldwide with a focus on science and technology lagging areas, trying to inspire the next generation of scientists. The projects that we develop are tailor-made, unique. We developed with particular needs for countries or regions. In the picture there, you can see a workshop that we had in Afghanistan. I think this was 2018. Since we're here in the context of the International Year for Basic Sciences and towards the SDGs, I wanted to touch on how we address those. So we absolutely need scientists in order to build towards digital and green economies. We absolutely need more investment in research and innovation to reach our Sustainable Development Goals. Furthermore, science has to be for everyone and should be accessible by absolutely everyone. And in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, I just want to say that research, scientific research at universities drives and improves the level and quality of education at absolutely all levels. It's not just at the highest level. The Physics Without Frontiers program would not exist without an extensive global network of volunteers. One of the things we realized when we started this program was that young researchers like PhD students and postdoctoral researchers from all over the world are absolutely willing and motivated to train and motivate and mentor young scientists from that they feel connected with. So from there, you might have, I don't know, just a random example, a PhD student from Palestine, but who is doing their PhD in Geneva. That person could be highly motivated to run programs in Palestine or in Gaza. And our program would it just wouldn't be possible without this global network of volunteers. Here you can sort of see a bit about our reach, the way that we work and the kind of aims of our program. I wanted to just briefly mention, when we say frontiers or Physics Without Frontiers, frontiers are not just geographical. They could be economic, social. For example, we do a lot of programs with women and girls in mind. They could be socio-political. So we have a focus on underrepresented ethnicities and also scientists in conflict regions, which was a theme of one of the sessions yesterday that was very interesting. And finally, if I can get there. I can't advance to the last slide, sorry.
Can we manually advance to the last slide?
The clicker's not working. Ah, there we
are.
go. Just to say that the program is now 10 years old. As of today, we've worked with over 150 different universities in 50 or more countries in the global south. And we've had a huge impact on over 10,000 students through hundreds of projects, activities, and events. And at least 300 students from countries without MSc or PhD programs have been mentored through our programs onto further study. And many of these are now running programs themselves. So there's a beautiful cycle through which the students that participate in the programs at the beginning of their careers, as they go on, they start organizing projects themselves. And that helps them maintain contact with their home countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bobby. It's a very inspiring project, and I really like this emphasis from Physics Without Frontiers and ICTP about science and physics being absolutely for everybody. So thank you very much. We'll talk more about this as we go on. So let's go to our last speaker, Leo. Maybe we can put the last set of slides up.
It is cut on the top. It is not.
Oh, I think the slides might need a refresh. The top of the slide might be cut off slightly.
Well, anyway.
Okay, maybe we can start.
We already forgot the first part.
Please do keep the microphone close to your mouth so the online audience.
Okay,
Thank
you very much. Well, for me it is a pleasure to be here because of the linkage with Sesame, which is an initiative which I saw when it was born in Yerevan, in an important meeting in Yerevan when I was, at that time, I was a UNESCO representative in Iran, and so I participated in this meeting in which Sesame was born, an experience which now I'm trying to generalize to use in Latin America. Well, first of all, it is good to have an idea of science in the Caribbean, looking at a certain number of data. And these data may explain in part why in the picture of Latin America, which was brought by Jihan before, you found that only Brazil and Chile, Brazil and only Brazil, I think, is present in Sesame. Science in Latin America is not equally distributed. In practice, the three countries which historically are more developed are Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. And but in the last 50 years, much development has taken place, and this is due to a very large extent to Abdus Salam, who, after he won the Nobel Prize, made a strong policy of promotion of science in Latin America, of which is part the center I created in Colombia some 40 years ago. However, you can find one data which is appalling. Guatemala is investing in science 0.03% of GNP. So when I listened a few minutes ago the claim of 1%, which is the historical threshold to be reached, I thought that this has not changed in the last 40 years, but we are much far from 10%. And there is an additional comment one could make on this. But anyway, in this situation, what is... where is... This is the second... well, why the synchrotrons are special developers for scientific community, so they can contribute to develop the scientific community in a significant way by doing first-class research, by the activity of training, and contributing, because of the offer of work which they give, to reduce the brain drain. Well, the brain drain is a complicated problem. I would not like to put too much emphasis on that, because brain drain is not terrible if the people maintain a contact with their own country. What I consider much worse is the internal brain drain, when people who are trained for a certain level are not used in their country. And I think that to reduce this brain drain for developing countries is even more important than to get rid of the brain drain to advanced country, which to some extent may be used. Synchrotrons are important because of a tremendous versatility of applications. Sekasi Mtinwa before mentioned several of them, so there is no need that I insist on this list. Just I would like to call your attention to the fact that research is an important part, but it is not the only one. And some of these applications, like for example those in medicine, are relevant for the development of the society globally, and not related to specific scientific activity. But also there's another aspect on which I would like to put attention, is the regional integration. Regional integration is a must for most developing countries. It is an illusion that small countries can make aggressive policy of science if they are not integrated with the region, and this is especially important in Central America, where we have very small countries. In America, there are 20 synchrotrons. 20 synchrotrons which are located in 19 in the north of the border between Mexico and the United States, and only one in Southern America, which is in Campinas. And this is a success story, because it is a long story which starts 25 years ago, when there was the first synchrotron in Campinas, UVX, and then this synchrotron has been upgraded with the fourth generation synchrotron, Sirius, a few years ago. And this really has a tremendous impact in Brazilian science. For example, Sirius has been built by Brazilian technology, using only Brazilian technology. There have been some discussion elsewhere. Some 7 years ago, there were two proposals of national projects, one in Colombia and one in Mexico. And now, more recently, a group of which I'm a member decided to make another proposal of regional character for the Caribbean and the Central America. The Mexican case was started in one state, then moved to another state, and now I don't know what will happen. What is our proposal on? Well, for energy, we think that there are certain advantages if it is 1.5 GeV. Why? Because this would be complementary to Sirius, and so this would allow to a complementary action in Latin America. The cost, the cost can be estimated between $1 and $2 billion. Now, I'm not going to discuss if this is much or more or not for a region like ours, but certainly one can think about a regional proposal of funding which make this affordable. There is the possibility of calling for help of development banks, and then there is the possibility of international cooperation. International cooperation, which too often for developing countries determines what should be done. Instead, in a sense, I think that to stress the importance of our proposal is to put on the table of international cooperation what is thought which should be done according to the priority of developing countries. Concerning to the site, there are three or four possibilities one can have in mind. The most logical one would be Mexico, which has a problem of being a federal state, but there are other possibilities to be considered in Colombia, Dominican Republic, and Central America. The international cooperation can play a major role thanks to the cooperation with the African Light Source project, to SESAME, with Sirius, and so on, and could lead to this possibility of international cooperation could lead to be a case for UNESCO to present a joint resolution for African project and Caribbean project in the next 24th General Conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Leo. Okay, so we will now start a little discussion session. I will start off with some questions to the panel, and we will start with Jehan. So Jehan, many of our panel members have been talking about the UNESCO Sustainable Development Goals towards the 2030 agenda. I wondered if you could talk about how international facilities, so for example, Sesame and other light sources, how do they address the challenges to achieve the SDGs?
Thank you. So I think I would like to put a hint before going on with this question, that Sesame is, as also Andrea Lausi, our scientific director, always say that Sesame is a young facility. So we started our operation in 2018 and now we're in 2022. So apart from this very short time of Sesame as a facility, International Research Center, I think we are already started to implement some of the goals, the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think we can divide them into like micro implementations and macro. I think Sesame as a facility itself, as I showed in the presentation, we already running with the green energy, which is one of the goals of this of the SDG. And we also signed the Climate Neutral Now agreement. That was also in the same year. And it's totally correct that we are heading in the right direction, but we wouldn't do this without international support from when it came to the solar power plant, we relied on the generous support of the EU. And also, I would say that if we would ever be applying or implementing these goals, it had to be always a loop of international cooperation with other synchrotron facilities, institutions, and governments. I don't forget UNESCO also in the initial birth of Sesame along the way from the 90s until today. And I think on the micro level, the experiments, those we perform at our beamlines, are heading also in the direction of the goals. For example, if I remember the goals, I remember there are 17, but there are also these goals of clean energy, clean water, and education, reducing the gender gap, which is also one of our objectives, is to get more women researchers into the facilities. And also training, education, industry, infrastructures. I think that we are having maybe 7 or 8 of these goals are already on the way.
Fantastic. Sir Kazi, I wonder if you can add a little bit to that. I mean, so we pointed out that there is no, at the moment, international facility for a light source currently in Africa.
Right.
What other benefits and impact do you think that will have for the region? And do you think it will help African countries towards the Sustainable Development Goals?
Yeah, as been said several times, these light sources impact so many fields. The fight against COVID, much of that fight was grounded at research from, light sources in various countries. So these facilities play a tremendous role in not only tackling problems from many disciplines. The nice thing about them is that you have many scientists working at the same time. For instance, these circumference around these light sources run several hundred meters. For instance, I don't know the one in Sesame, 133, the one in Max 4, 500 meters. So you have a lot of room to set up experimental areas. And I know that these light sources can, when we talked about the number of beam lines at Sesame, for instance, but the older ones, the really big ones, can have 50 to 100 beam lines. Okay, you can imagine the number of experiments that are going on at the same time, so many people there. And not only that, after you learn the system, you can go back to your home institution and prepare your samples and send them off. And the scientists at the labs there will run the samples for you. So, these are just tremendously important instruments. As a matter of fact, to me, they're on the level of the computer, how it has revolutionized many fields, on the level of lasers. And so now you have synchrotron light sources. They just cut across all kinds of disciplines. And so with these devices, having one in Africa where you can prioritize them for problems for Africa, it would make a tremendous difference. Because right now, if you're an African researcher using light sources, most light sources you have to apply for beam time. So the administration at these labs will determine what they want. They will set priorities, right? So Africa, fighting the diseases, for instance, that are endemic to Africa, may not have as high a priority. So you're depending upon other light sources in other parts of the world to give you time to solve your problem. Whereas if you have an African light source, you can prioritize it, right? In fact, the president of South Africa the other night was saying, the kinds of trouble he had getting the vaccines into Africa. Well, if Africa had its own facility for generating vaccines, you wouldn't have that problem. So anyway, so these light sources are just phenomenal, actually. In fact, I'm a high energy physicist, and so our accelerators in the U.S., they've actually shut some of them down and turned them into light source facilities. And so I should be ashamed advocating for light sources, but I've just learned of the power of these devices.
Yeah, they sound incredibly impactful. Leo, I wonder if you can add to that. So you're advocating for some light sources in Latin America. How can they build up local and interregional cooperation? And is that beneficial specifically for stability between countries and interregional cooperation?
Well, we are in a situation which is very much like the situation which existed in the Middle East 20 years ago. That means that in this moment we don't have a certain capacity in the region. The capacity for many of physicists and engineers. Instead, we have a potential capacity in biology and agriculture, biodiversity, archaeological study, and so. So I think we have to do two things. First of all, to create the capacity among physicists and engineers. But for this, I think we can rely very much on the cooperation promised by Sesame on one hand, by LNLS on the other hand. So that, the case of Sesame teaches that even today I listened to Mr. Parikh saying that one must convince politicians because they know that certain things are urgent. The point is that the urgency of things is sold as the opportunity cost that many developing countries have to face and so on. This is a lie. I mean, the opportunity cost is an argument which is used against science, but is not used, for example, for education, because education everybody recognizes important. And therefore, we must make a very strong work to convince people that social justice and science are competitors, and not only science for social justice. But this competition is a competition only because of the blindness of economists and politicians, which bet on the opportunity cost argument.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really important point. Communication with policymakers is often very complicated, especially when maybe they're not rich in their scientific knowledge. So I think you're doing a really good job to try and push that agenda. I wanted to move on to you, Bobby. You were discussing a little bit about your work in conflict regions. And I'm wondering about, first of all, how would science, or especially something like fundamental physics, be beneficial in a conflict region? And why do you think that would help towards political stability?
Well, through some of the projects that I've been involved with in conflict regions, I've come to understand that when conflicts happen, there's a serious risk that a whole generation of scientists and educators can be completely decimated. You know, just to give you an idea, to create a successful physics department in a university takes decades, at least 2 decades, to build up an active, functioning, productive physics department. And a conflict can just completely ruin that in weeks or months. And we've seen that, for example, in Afghanistan. So supporting educators and scientists during and after conflict is actually much more efficient than having to rebuild from scratch post, after the conflict has happened. One thing we realized with our projects with Afghanistan is that young people need and actually crave education. We are now currently inundated with requests from university students in Afghanistan for educational support that we don't actually have the capacity to provide, unfortunately. But we're thinking about the most efficient way of doing that, and this has all happened since the regime change that happened relatively recently. I don't know if that really answers your questions, but I think it addresses some aspects of it.
Thank you, yes. But I think that's fantastic work ICTP do to specifically look at conflict regions. And I think it does help towards stability where they have scientific ties with neighbouring countries. So I'm not sure if, Johan, you'd like to pick up a little bit on that, talking a little bit about interregional and international cooperation through science. Can that help support countries either in conflict or that have diplomatic problems?
Yeah, actually, it really touched us a lot at Sesame to have this point. And just first, I would like to congratulate you that you managed to get this experience in Afghanistan. So you are gaining from a side, but you are losing from the other side. And we don't want to have these kind of draining the energies and the capabilities of the scientists in the region. The problem of the region when it comes to science is not the technical or scientific skills, because this is something that you can learn, you can invest in yourself, you can invest in the young people and so on. And but the problem is mostly political, financial, all these sorts. And I don't deny that the situation when it comes to the fact that science diplomacy helped our international or interregional cooperation, it really helped. It really helped. I give an example of one of our users meeting. We have an annual users meeting that was running since 2001, for example, just years, much years before the Sesame is operational. And I think that was a very good movement from the people working for Sesame to build the community first. So imagine that you are building your community for 17 years. They are meeting, they are talking, they are destroying the political barriers between each other. They try to put aside all the political conflicts between their countries, but just they come for science. Once I saw a very dramatic scene in front of me that I wouldn't also deny that, but people in the media, they see only a few members of Sesame always in unrest or political conflict, but the truth is that it's almost the eighth of the Sesame members are in conflict. You just don't know when. And in the beginning of the Sesame users meeting, you could easily find participants going out of the room just because they don't want to listen to this speaker because he is of another nationality that they have conflict together. But I would say that, for example, this is something I saw in 2005, but in 2015, this didn't happen. They were still in the room. They considered the speaker.
This is clear. We don't have any experience in that, and one should start from scratch. But for this, I think there is a basic education system which to some extent works. Why I say to some extent? Because the university system in Central America, in Latin America is good, but it's not accessible to everybody. Let's take a country like Colombia. In Colombia, now in practice the education at high school level reaches almost everybody. But when you go to the university, even if there are mechanisms which allow you to enter the university, the desertion is very high, and it affects basically certain social classes. So, I mean, it is a social problem, and this must be done independently of synchrotron or not synchrotron. Specifically, we don't have experience in this, and I think we rely very much on the possible support from Brazil and from Sesame. For what concerns the scientific community of the users, then in particular in biology, the level is quite high. So that on this I'm not worried about the fact that we don't have people. We must convince people that this is a useful investment. This is a different matter.
Thank you. Okay, and I will bring the last question to Bobby before we open it up to the audience. So I hope you have some questions ready for our panel. So Bobby, you talked a lot about diversity in science. So, you know, we were talking about doing training, networking in all areas of the world, even areas of conflict. But why do you see this big need to diversify science? What benefits does that bring for the scientific community?
Well, I think I'll try and emphasize why it's important for the world. Young people, well, we already know about the importance of science, we mentioned it, for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Young people need role models that they can immediately connect with. I can maybe, I don't know, explain it through my own story, my family, even though originally from India, my father and I were born in Uganda, and I grew up after the Indian people were forcibly removed from Uganda. My family and I grew up in London, and as a result of that, we grew up, in the poorest parts of London. And at that time, in the 70s, I faced adversity and abuse on a daily basis as a kid going to school. And if I, was looking for role models, there weren't any that I could really identify with. So Stephen Hawking, for example, and other great scientists were sort of so far away from the life that I was living. It was almost like they were it was almost like they were in a completely unclimbable ivory tower. So that's why we need to diversify science. Science has to reflect the real world, and in order to address real world problems. The spectrum of scientists and science has to reflect the world that we actually live in. In my case, eventually I, did become a reasonably successful scientist, and I came to know Stephen Hawking for more than 2 decades. But if I think about the opportunities that are just not there for the students, and in all of the regions now that we've worked with through the ICTP, there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done to address this problem. And so we absolutely need to diversify science.
Thank you, Bobby. Very inspiring story. And it's, fantastic work from ICTP and PWF that work to bring all into science and make sure that science is for everyone. Okay, so can we open the floor to some questions from you guys? I don't know if you have some burning questions that have come up during the panel. I don't know if we have a microphone we could pass for Atish. We have to use this microphone at the front. I think we have to. It's for the online streaming. So, although we can hear you, we want our online audience. And do introduce yourself, please, before the question. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Michael Gastra. I'm from the Human Sciences Research Council in South Africa. Thanks for the really wonderful talks. It's been a pleasure to be here. I was earlier this year at the Big Science Business Forum in Grenada, and walking around, and I noticed that at each of the big physics infrastructures, they had a stand and they would have a book about the impact of their work. So I went around collecting these books. And it's become a thing that when physics infrastructures meet the science policy space, they need to account for the impact, if they're using public money especially. Now, at the same time, I'm working for a project called Attract, which is the Horizon 2020 project, which is putting money into large-scale science infrastructures to try and develop spin-offs and commercialization of the technologies developed there. We're doing an impact assessment of this project. So for this purpose, we need to conceptualize what is the impact of particle accelerators. These are our case studies. And there's previous work on this from Ortio and his colleagues from CERN, from the OECD, ways to think about it before you even start measuring it. And there's a growing field of of research that's looking into this, small but growing, because there's now a demand. There's a demand for particle accelerators to account for their impact, broad spectrum. So what I'd like to put to the group here is, what are your thoughts on conceptualizing this? We've seen the science diplomacy, the skills development, all these things. So to really run this impact assessment, we drew on these literatures and we came up with a kind of schematic. We've got a map of the actors involved, the researchers, the scientists, the funders, the IP, the skills and all that. So we look at the following. The first is serendipity. In other words, you develop tech for a particle accelerator, but you end up using it in medicine or industry or social development or something else. The other one is spillovers. You develop capabilities in your lab, but they're used somewhere else, or knowledge. The obvious one is spin-offs. There's something that can be commercialized. Spins off, generates economic activity and benefits. There's the skills and learning, and then there's a broader social impact, all the salaries and the lives that are changed and so on. So using this, it's been quite astonishing once you unpack it, what the impact of these facilities actually are, and it extends from the immediate geographical location of the facility to all over the world, wherever those technologies end up being used or having an influence. So my question then is, do you have any thoughts on that schematic and the conceptualization of the impact of particle accelerators?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are direct impacts. Right? For instance, particle accelerators have been built to discover the most fundamental particles in the universe, right? So that deepens our understanding of atoms and molecules and so forth. So we know a lot more about electrons and muons and the various quarks. I mean, this is in my field of high energy physics. But there are also the sort of, I don't know what you call it, sort of the spin-off things, and probably the most impactful is the World Wide Web, which all of you who are using your phones or whatever are constantly using that. But the World Wide Web was a direct spin-off from research in high energy physics, right? I mean, people needed to go back to their home laboratories and continue to work on the same set of data and so forth. So there are just tremendous impacts from the history of particle accelerators.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Atish, I think you were next.
Okay, thank you for a very nice presentation. It's, I mean, I have known this, but okay. So first of all, I'm the director of International Center for Theoretical Physics, Atish Dabholkar. I'm a theoretical physicist. It's really great to hear about all the achievements of Sezame and Physics Without Frontiers. It's quite inspiring, even though I have heard it before. I have a question for Sekazi and also perhaps the younger you mentioned who is going to succeed.
Yeah, but he left, actually.
He left?
Prosper Ngabanzizo, he's not here right now.
No, I have a sort of a more practical question. So if you look at the price tag of this kind of a machine, I guess Sezame was like 100 million euros, and you were talking about €1 billion. So clearly it's a big ask going to a government in Africa. Also, what we have learned from the experience of Sezame is that not only is it important to have the machine, a very fancy machine, but to really to create the user base. I mean, that's actually where ICTP has been collaborating with you, who can, condensed matter physicists and medical physicists who want to use this kind of a fancy facility for their research, which was also a long task. It takes several years to really create that kind of community. So my question is, I don't know this field well enough to judge it for myself, that instead of trying to make this big jump, to $1 billion machine, is there some pathway to it through smaller machines like $5 million machines, which can be first implemented at the national level to really get the African countries interested, to build the, with a long-term planning for, let's say, 10 years. Do you think there is such a pathway, or is it like CERN that you really have to have a big machine to start with?
Yeah, to do the ultimate, most optimal research, you do need the big machine. However, there are things called compact light sources that you can fit into your own university laboratory. And it could be quite impactful, but it won't have the ability to bring many researchers together to share knowledge and be in a competitive situation relative to people at the big light sources in other countries. So that's why I think that goal should be worked on. The kind you're talking about for, Yes.
Sorry. Yeah. I'm saying I agree that your goal should be the more ambitious one, but
right.
Can the smaller machines be a pathway where countries can really meaningfully make a commitment,
Yes.
rather than say that, okay, we will, nobody's going to give you suddenly 1 billion euros. So could that be a way to convince the governments of the utility of this?
Right, I mean, in fact, that's been discussed, right? I mean, people have talked about that. But the problem with that, I mean, how long will it be before we get the big machine? If people get off on the little small machines of limited applicability, then, I don't know. I mean, I'm 73 now, and I would love to see an African light source before I go to, I hope it's heaven that I go to, but you never know which way you're going. But, yeah, I mean, that certainly could be. But we worry about this, the length of time, because, we're now at the 4th generation light source. I mean, by the time the African light source is built, there will be a 5th generation. It's hard to be competitive in the world. So, I mean, like what Brazil did, it knew it had to go for the the big machine. So that's what they did. So you're quite right. I think it could be a pathway, but not an advisable one.
Leah, would you like to?
Oh, yes.
I would like to make a double answer to your question. First of all, the cost I mentioned, let's take $1 billion. If one used the system of financing of CERN, would mean that over 20 years, a country like Mexico would have to put something like $10 million, which makes no difference with respect to the situation I described to you of 0.24% of the GNP. So the cost is affordable. But the idea of the smaller machine exists, goes around, in particular in a situation like Central America and Caribbean, where there are many countries. So one idea we are considering is that one could have, in parallel with a regional synchrotron located somewhere, to have a number of smaller machines whose cost would be minimal with respect to the full cost. And one such idea is currently discussed with a colleague from Berkeley as a possibility for Dominican Republic. So the idea exists and goes around.
Thank you. Any last questions? Anyone else?
If there is time, that's it. So I just want to touch the same point of our experience at Sesame. We have here Andrea Lausio, who's our scientific director. But I want to touch the point of the need to upgrade. So if we start now for the African light source with the pathway facility, we don't know until when that can be used in the world now going to 4th generation and maybe the 5th generation. So it was important. I mean, it's something that we observed at Sesame in the beginning with the scientific advisors of Sesame. They pushed a lot to have the donated machine to be upgraded, because until now also the reputation about Sesame that we are using the old Bessie 1 machine, which is not the truth. So we moved to 2.5 giga electron volt energy machine, that's to bring Sesame to the third generation light source category. And I think that was very wise, because if we had used the machine as also a pathway until we get money for a fancy one, I think we wouldn't be able to do it. So having, with the upgrade that's going on now continuously and rapidly, it would be better to have a very well established machine, because you never know how long you can deal with it. Yeah. Also, the old machine of our outdated machine, you need a lot of maintenance, and again you will go into a loop of maintenance and upgrade, and it will not also attract the scientists from all over the world to come in. This is something also we are proud of at Sesame, because we receive proposals from users from United States, from UK, from Australia, Germany, Italy, France. I mean, and this also gives us an encouraging sense that we are providing a top-level science, and we are competing also, although we are still a young facility.
I must apologize to Jihan. I forgot to mention she also is on the executive committee of the African Light Source. But I guess it's okay, because any great organization, you can be sure Jihan is in the leadership.
Andrea, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to add another comment on this path, or speaking of smaller machines, and how is the impact of large size facilities. I have always worked in these large size facilities, so I am biased, obviously. But I would remember here the missing word in the acronym of SESAME. So SESAME stands for Synchrotron Light for Experimental Science and Applications in the Middle East. It's a fantastic acronym. I chapeau to those who invented it. But there is one missing word which is just suspended there, and it is very important. This is open. Because whenever you think of Sesame, you always think open sesame. This is extremely true. So it is a place where you meet. And so you can cross-fertilize much more than if you stay in your own laboratory. It is, I have seen this happening in Italy with Elettra. Elettra is a machine which was built in the early 90s, and one of the first 3 third-generation machines in the world, together with the Berkeley machine and ESRF. And it has actually stimulated more than dragged resources all over the country and in Europe. So, and it is also a place where you compete and confront with the international community. It says Elettra has more or less 40% of users from Italy, and the other 60% comes from everywhere, which means that you are actually validating your national community against the international scene. So it is a motor. It is not. It is you have to put gasoline in it, but then you can move. Yeah? So it has a fantastic impact. I'm a strong believer in that.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm sure we can continue these discussions over the lunch. I just have one last closing question for you all. So please try to answer in less than 60 seconds if you can. So I want to ask you about what we can do now going forward. So what do you feel that we can do together? We've talked about ICTP and IFA and Sesame and African infrastructures and Latin America. So what can we do together? What can we learn from each other, and how can we move forward in kind of the environment of science for peace? Who'd like to go first?
I think the most important thing that we can do is for everyone to acquaint yourselves with these advanced light sources. So if you would just go and study, pick up a brochure that I have here and spread the word, because many people are just not aware of them. Is that 60 seconds? Thank you, that's perfect. I'm sorry? It's better for them to come because there are different languages here, so people have to just pick from what language.
Okay, I will pick, I think I'm the only one here who will pick the Arabic brochure. That will be nice. Oh, also, okay, so too, you have two customers for the Arabic brochure. So no, from my experience, I would say that we need more peace, and we need more inclusiveness, and we need more gender balance. Yeah.
I think that I owe so much to ICTP in my life that if I ask something more to ICTP, may be ridiculous. But I think that ICTP can play a major role in promoting the recognition by UNESCO that this initiative in Africa and Caribbean are not two initiatives to look at as a parallel initiative. They are the same thing, and it's the same thing for which Abdus Salam has fought so many years and has given us this lesson.
I'm not sure how I can follow all of that. I'll just simply say that we should continue to work on these initiatives. You know, the idea of an African light source and the initiative that Leo was describing in Latin America, they're amazing. And you know, the question about the impact that we had from the audience, you know, actually the preamble to the question, you summarized it perfectly, the incredible impact that these types of facilities can have. And it's been, you know, and the sort of science and the sort of scientific diplomacy as well as the economic and social impact of these facilities are incredible. I mean, just, and we didn't really get a proper answer to the question of how you conceptualize this impact. It's a very difficult question to answer, but it's clear that we should just simply continue to support these initiatives.
Can I add one thing to you?
Yeah.
Because there is a very interesting slide of ICTP. It's the slide of the visitors from Latin America over the years. I don't have it here, but I used it in other talks. One can appreciate that before Salam went to Latin America, they were about 100 per year. In few years, they arrived at 500 per year, and with effects in specific countries. Well, one was the effect of the center it helped me to create in Colombia. But so it is clear. So the impact of this in this region is tremendous. So what I would hope that this discussion may lead in in Central America mainly, Caribbean, and in Africa to some similar effect.
Thank you, Leo. Okay, well, I think we're ready to wrap up this session. So I'd like to thank our panelists. They've all demonstrated their passion for their individual facilities and projects that are really inspirational, working towards science for peace and science for all. And to thank you as an audience for coming to listen to us today. Thank you.